Chapter 11. The Urinary System. Introduction. As the body metabolizes the various foods and nutrients taken in through the digestive tract, body cells produce metabolic wastes in the form of carbon dioxide gas, heat, and water. The breakdown of proteins into amino acids and the subsequent metabolism of the amino acids produce nitrogenous wastes like ammonia. The harmful ammonia is converted by liver enzymes into less harmful urea. In addition, the body accumulates excess ions of sodium, chloride, potassium, hydrogen, sulfate, and phosphate. It is a role of the urinary system to maintain a balance of these products and to remove excesses from the blood. This system helps to keep the body in homeostasis by both removing and restoring selected amounts of solutes and water from the blood. The urinary system consists of 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, the urinary bladder, and the ureter. The kidneys regulate the composition and volume of the blood and remove wastes from the blood in the form of urine. The urine consists of the metabolic waste urea, excess water, excess ions, and toxic wastes that may have been consumed with food. Urine is excreted from each kidney through the kidney ureter. It is then stored in the urinary bladder until it is expelled from the body through the ureter. The kidneys are extremely deficient organs and are crucial in maintaining homeostasis in the body. The person can function very well with only 1 kidney, as we know from hearing about kidney donations among family members. In fact, as long as at least 1/3 of the kidney is functional, the person can survive. However, if kidney failure occurs, death is inevitable without medical treatment through kidney dialysis. Other systems of the body also participate in waste excretion. The respiratory system excretes carbon dioxide gas and water vapor. The integumentary system excretes dissolved wastes, example the urea in perspiration. The digestive system excretes indigestible materials, like plant fiber, and some bacteria. Functions of the urinary system. The major role of maintaining homeostasis with respect to the composition and volume of blood and body fluids is controlled by the kidneys, which perform various functions. Excretion. The kidneys filter large amounts of fluid from the bloodstream. They are the major excretory organs of the body because they eliminate nitrogenous wastes, drugs, and toxins from the body. Although the skin, liver, intestines, and lungs also eliminate wastes, they cannot compensate if the kidneys fail. In addition, the kidneys can reabsorb needed substances and return them to the blood. Maintain blood volume and concentration. The kidneys control blood volume by regulating the proper balance in the blood between salts and water. They regulate the volume of urine produced. They also regulate the concentration of ions in body fluids and blood, so the proper balance of sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, and phosphate ions is maintained. pH regulation. The kidneys control the proper balance of hydrogen ions in the blood, thus helping to regulate the proper pH levels in the body along with buffers in the blood and the respiratory system. Blood pressure. The kidneys produce the enzyme, which helps adjust filtration pressure. Erythrocyte concentration. The kidneys produce the hormone that stimulates red blood cell production and red bone marrow. They help regulate the concentration of erythrocytes in the blood in cases of chronic hypoxia, inadequate oxygen in tissue cells. Vitamin D production. The kidneys convert vitamin D to its active form calciferol. Vitamin D is important for normal bone and teeth development. It also helps control calcium and phosphorus metabolism. The kidneys participate, along with the liver and the skin, in vitamin D synthesis. The external anatomy of the kidneys. The kidneys are paired organs that are reddish in color and resemble kidney beans in shape. They are about the size of a closed fist. They are located just above the waist between the parietal peritoneum and the posterior wall of the abdomen. This placement of the kidneys is also referred to as retroperitoneal. The right kidney is slightly lower than the left because of the large area occupied by the liver. The average adult kidney measures about 11.25 centimeters 4 inches long, 5.0 to 7.5 centimeters 2 to 3 inches wide and 2.5 centimeters 1 inch thick. Near the center of the concave border of the kidney is a notch called the hilum through which the ureter leaves the kidney. Blood vessels, nerves, and lymph vessels also enter and exit the kidney through this hilum. The hilum is the entrance to a cavity in the kidney called the renal sinus, which consists of connective tissue and fat. 3 layers of tissue surround each kidney. The innermost layer is the renal capsule. It is a smooth, transparent, fibrous connective tissue membrane that connects with the outermost covering of the ureter at the hilum. It functions as a barrier against infection and trauma to the kidney. The second layer, on top of the renal capsule, is the adipose capsule. It is a mass of fatty tissue that protects the kidney from blows. It also firmly holds the kidney in place in the abdominal cavity. The outermost layer is the renal fascia, which consists of a thin layer of fibrous connective tissue that also anchors the kidneys to their surrounding structures and to the abdominal wall. The internal anatomy of the kidney. The frontal section through the kidney will reveal an outer area called the cortex and an inner area known as the medulla. In a freshly dissected kidney, the cortex would be reddish in color and the medulla reddish-brown. Within the medulla are 8 to 18 striated, triangular structures called the renal pyramids. The striated appearance is caused by an aggregation of straight tubules and blood vessels. The bases of the pyramids face the cortex and their tips, called the renal papillae, point toward the center of the kidney. The cortex is a smooth textured area that extends from the renal capsule to the bases of the renal pyramids. It also extends into the spaces between the pyramids. This cortical substance in between the renal pyramids is called the renal columns. Together, the cortex and the renal pyramids make up the parenchyma of the kidney. Structurally, this parenchyma consists of millions of microscopic collecting tubules called nephrons. The nephrons are the functional units of the kidney. They regulate the composition and volume of blood and form the urine. A funnel-shaped structure called a minor calyx surrounds the tip of each renal pyramid. There can be 8 to 18 minor calyces. Each minor calyx collects urine from the ducts of the pyramids. Minor calyces join to form major calyces. There are 2 or 3 major calyces in the kidney. The major calyces join together to form the large collecting funnel called the renal pelvis, which is found in the renal sinus. It is the renal pelvis that eventually narrows to form the ureter. Urine drains from the tips of the renal pyramids into the calyces. It then collects in the renal pelvis and leaves the kidney through the ureter. As you can see, this is the internal anatomy of the kidney. The anatomy of the nephrons. The functional units of the kidney are the nephrons. There are two types of nephrons. Juxtamedullary nephrons have loops of Henle that extend deep into the medulla. Cortical nephrons have loops of Henle that do not extend deep into the medulla. Basically, a nephron is a microscopic renal tubule, which functions as a filter, and its vascular surrounding blood vessels component. The nephron begins as a double-walled globe known as Bowman's glomerular capsule. This is located in the cortex of the kidney. The innermost layer of the capsule is known as the visceral layer and consists of epithelial cells called podocytes. This visceral layer of podocytes surrounds a capillary network known as the glomerulus. The outer wall of Bowman's glomerular capsule is known as the parietal layer. A collecting space separates the inner visceral layer from the outer parietal layer of the capsule. Together, Bowman's glomerular capsule and the enclosed glomerulus make up what is called the renal corpuscle. The visceral layer of Bowman's capsule and the endothelial capillary network of the glomerulus form an endothelial capsular membrane, which is the site of filtration of water and solutes from the blood. This filtered fluid now moves into the renal tubule. Bowman's capsule opens into the first part of the renal tubule, called the proximal convoluted tubule, located in the cortex. The next section of the tubule is called the descending limb of Henle, which narrows in diameter as it dips into the medulla of the kidney. The tubule then bends into a U-shaped structure known as the loop of Henle. As the tubule straightens, it increases in diameter and ascends toward the cortex of the kidney. Here it is called the ascending limb of Henle. In the cortex, the tubule again becomes convoluted and is now called the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule ends by merging with a large straight collecting duct. In the medulla, collecting ducts connect with the distal tubules of other nephrons. The collecting ducts now pass through the renal pyramids and open into the calyces of the pelvis through a number of larger papillary ducts, which empty urine into the renal pelvis. To facilitate filtration, most of the descending limb has thin walls of simple squamous epithelium, and the rest of the nephron and collecting duct is composed of simple cuboidal epithelium. The proximal tubule, the ascending limb of Henle, and the collecting duct transport molecules and ions across the wall of the nephron. The descending limb of Henle is highly permeable to water and solutes. As you can see, this is the anatomy of a nephron, the functional unit of a kidney. And this is the flow of materials from the filtered blood in the kidney. Blood and nerve supply to the nephrons, because the nephrons are mainly responsible for removing wastes from the blood and regulating its electrolytes, which are responsible for the acid or alkaline components of blood and fluid content. They are richly supplied with blood vessels. The right and left renal arteries transport 1/4 of the total cardiac output directly to the kidneys. About 1,200 milliliters of blood passes through the kidneys every minute. This amounts to blood being filtered of wastes approximately 60 times a day. Just before or immediately after entering the hilum, The renal artery divides into several branches that enter the parenchyma of the kidney in between the renal pyramids. In the renal columns, these branches are called the interlobar arteries. At the base of the pyramids, the interlobar arteries arch between the cortex and the medulla. Here they are called the arcuate arteries. Branches of the arcuate arteries produce a series of interlobular arteries that enter the cortex and divide into afferent arterioles. Each afferent arteriole takes blood from the renal artery to Bowman's glomerular capsule, where the arteriole divides into the tangled capillary network known as the glomerulus. The glomerular capillaries then reunite to form an efferent arteriole that carries blood away from the glomerular capsule. Each efferent arteriole further divides to form a network of capillaries called the peritubular capillaries, which surround the convoluted tubules of the nephron. Eventually, the peritubular capillaries reunite to form an interlobular vein. The filtered blood then drains into the arcuate vein at the base of the pyramid. From the arcuate veins, the blood travels through the interlobar veins that run between the pyramids in the renal columns. The interlobar veins unite at the single right and left renal vein that leave the right and left kidney at the hilum. The nerve supply to the kidney comes from the renal plexus of the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic neurons, using norepinephrine, innervate the blood vessels of the kidneys. This stimulation causes constriction of the arteries, resulting in a decrease in blood flow and a decrease in filtrate formation. Thus, there is a decrease in urine formation. Urine volume production increases in response to a decrease in sympathetic innervation to the renal arteries. Trauma or increased physical activity causes an increase in sympathetic stimulation, resulting in low levels of urine production. As you can see, this is the blood flow through the kidney. Physiology of the nephrons. The nephrons carry out a number of important functions. They control blood concentration and volume by removing selected amounts of water and solutes. They help regulate blood pH. They remove toxic wastes from the blood, and they stimulate red blood cell production and red bone marrow by producing a hormone called erythropoietin. The eliminated materials are collectively called urine. Urine is formed by three processes in the nephrons: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. In glomerular filtration, the glomerulus filters water and certain dissolved substances from the plasma of blood. This process of glomerular filtration results in increased blood pressure. This increased pressure forces the fluid to filter from the blood. The dissolved substances include positively charged ions of sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, negatively charged ions of chloride, bicarbonate, sulfate, and phosphate, and glucose, urea, and uric acid. This filtrate is mainly water with some of the same components as the blood plasma. No large proteins are filtered. Both kidneys filter about 45 gallons of blood plasma per day. Yet only a small portion of the glomerular filtrate leaves the kidneys as urine. Most fluid gets reabsorbed in the renal tubules and enters the plasma. The tubular reabsorption process transports substances out of the tubular fluid and back into the blood of the peritubular capillary. This reabsorption occurs throughout the renal tubule, but the majority of reabsorption occurs in the proximal convoluted tubule. Active transport reabsorbs glucose while osmosis rapidly reabsorbs water. Active transport reabsorbs amino acids, creatine, lactic acid, uric acid, citric acid, and ascorbic acid. Active transport also reabsorbs phosphate, calcium, sulfate, sodium, and potassium ions. Chloride ions and other negatively charged ions are reabsorbed by electrochemical attraction. The descending limb of phenol reabsorbs water by osmosis. The ascending limb reabsorbs sodium, potassium, and chloride ions by active transport. The distal convoluted tubule reabsorbs sodium ions by active transport and water by osmosis. The collecting ducts of the nephrons also will reabsorb water by osmosis. About 95% of water is reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. Hormones, such as vasopressin and aldosterone, are essential to help control this process. In tubular secretion, substances will move from the plasma in the peritubular capillary into the fluid of the renal tubule. The amount of a certain substance excreted into the urine may eventually exceed the amount originally filtered from the blood plasma in the glomerulus. The proximal convoluted tubule actively secretes penicillin, creatinine, and histamine into the tubular fluid. The entire renal tubule actively secretes hydrogen ions H+, thus helping to regulate the pH of the body fluids. The distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct secrete potassium ions K+. Urine consists of water and solutes that the kidneys either eliminate or retain in the body to maintain homeostasis. Urine is about 95% water with urea, uric acid, some amino acids, and electrolytes. The daily production of urine is between 0.6 and 2.5 liters per day. This depends on a person's fluid intake, environmental temperature and humidity, respiratory rates, body temperature, and emotional conditions. Urine production of 56 milliliters an hour is considered normal. 30 milliliters an hour indicates possible kidney failure. As you can see, this is the main functions of the nephrons: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. The ureters. Anatomy and function. The body has two ureters, each one descending from a kidney. Each ureter is basically an extension of the pelvis of a kidney and extends about 25 to 30 centimeters 10 to 12 inches down to the urinary bladder. Each begins as the funnel-shaped renal pelvis and descends parallel on each side of the vertebral column to the bladder. They connect to the urinary bladder posteriorly. The principal function of the ureters is to transport urine from the renal pelvis into the urinary bladder. The ureters are lined with a mucus coat of transitional epithelium that can stretch. Connective tissue binds the epithelium to a layer of smooth muscle. The urine is carried through the ureters primarily by peristaltic contractions of the smooth muscular walls of the ureters, but gravity and hydrostatic pressure also contribute. The outermost layer of the ureter is composed of connective tissue called the adventitia. Peristaltic waves pass from the kidney to the urinary bladder, varying from 1 to 5 waves per minute, depending on the amount of urine formation. Consuming excess liquids will cause more urine formation per unit of time. As you can see, this is the two ureters and the urinary bladder in a female.